you've read a lot of our statistics, but I think it bears repeating. Half of the world's global GDP is dependent on nature and biodiversity, and that represents about 44 trillion. Unfortunately, and I think you folks, everyone probably notices, especially if you walk outside on a warm summer evening, there's less birds, there's less insects. Over the last 20 years, there's been a remarkable decrease in nature, biodiversity, animals, plants, and fauna. Industrialization and population growth has caused nearly 1 million species to be on the brink of extinction in the next coming years, and 25% are threatened. And these are some of our best and most loved animals and plants. The Sumatran orangutan, the Sumatran rhino, the Asian elephant, iconic species. But because of population growth and the consumption nature of the earth, we're truly running out of nature. The Paulson Institute and the Nature Conservancy wrote a report back in 2019 that estimated that we are shortfall for regenerating and refilling, replenishing nature to about $1 billion, $800 billion a year. And that it requires that much input just to maintain the current level of usage. So when you mentioned the World Economic Report, what that's really saying is it's not enough just to maintain what we have. We have an increasingly consumptive populace and a growing population. We need to rebuild our natural infrastructure. And everyone knows that. And hence the Biden administration is rebuilding our physical infrastructure. At Karner Blue Capital, we want to rebuild our natural infrastructure. And those three socioeconomic sectors are key to doing that. Food, including agriculture and our fishing. And then you have extractives, which includes metals and mining, oil and gas. And then you have infrastructure, buildings, utilities, electricity. And so this we see, yes, we have a challenge like we do with climate change, but this is really, Lori, an opportunity, right? This is an opportunity for companies that can grab the reins of the future and change their business processes to help build the sustainable natural infrastructure. And most importantly, this is an opportunity, a vast opportunity for those participants in the finance industry, whether they be investors, bankers, or insurers, to recognize the leaders in these industries, because those companies that are leaders will provide outpaced returns for their underlying financiers. And so at Karner Blue Capital, we've spent the last 5 years trying to identify those leaders, because we knew on the heels of climate change that this risk is a definite threat to humanity and the planet as a whole. So I'm going to let Robert Clapham, our sustainability analyst, who's been with the firm for 3 years now, walk through a little bit of how we identify leaders. Robert?
Thank you, Vicki, for that intro, and especially for highlighting the need for investment managers who have an important role in this space to create sustainable investment vehicles and strategies to reverse nature loss and commit to protecting and restoring biodiversity through, financial activities and investments. And while there might not be a lot of data right now in the space, and it's a nascent industry, really, I think it's worth getting into how KBC, Karner Blue, is approaching the problem with its research process. And I'll start off there by just noting that this is really an academic exercise and process that requires cross-stakeholder consultation with organizations like the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, the WEF, the World Economic Forum that was mentioned earlier, as well as the Convention on Biological Diversity. And really, the way that sustainability criteria is incorporated into investment decision-making starts with, an identification of core industries and a scoping of areas of business that impact nature. So for example, here we're talking about, for example, the food and agriculture industry, where nature lays the foundation for those systems, and is also an industry which accounts for 80% of global land use change, which is a main driver of biodiversity loss. And other industries like waste and wastewater that affect the environment in significant ways through the operation of landfills. And from that, the development of science-based metrics and key performance indicators are crucial for measuring and reporting performance across these indicators and tracking that data over time to ascertain these industry leaders and investment opportunities that arise. And after this step of the process, and when leaders are identified, that is the stage in which fundamental financial research is utilized to create these portfolios of impact. And Andrew, who's the other co-founder of Karner Capital, is on the call and can provide further insight on how these strategies and resulting portfolios that result from this bottom-up sustainability research platform can create true impact in transforming to a truly sustainable and resilient global economy.
Thanks so much, Robert. I appreciate that. The process that Robert just described is really central to our theory of change, which is that identifying leaders that have begun to take the steps that are necessary to integrate biodiversity into their business operations and supply chains. They are in the vanguard of the movement that is needed to actually realize the changes that will ultimately have on-the-ground impacts, such as an example of palm oil, where palm oil is ubiquitous across numerous products. But if companies can begin to change the recipes for certain products to reduce the amount of palm oil that is included there, or can manage to figure out how to actually create products that have no palm oil, then we can wind up with, for example, a change that would, back to Vicki's point, have a tremendous impact on the Sumatran orangutan and maintaining animal habitats in tropical environments. So it's the papers that have been mentioned. One that hasn't been mentioned is the Dasgupta review, which came out in 2021. In that paper, Professor Dasgupta concluded that we would need natural resources of 1.6 planets to sustain our current living standards. And so we can all see that clearly that's not a sustainable path forward. And whether it's the World Economic Forum or the Nature Conservancy, all the papers have concluded the same thing, that business as usual can't continue. So we can't keep making these products, for example, with palm oil at the levels we are, and expect us to come out the other side of this in good shape. And we think part of our theory of change is that if every company began to make even incremental changes, given the scope of some of the publicly traded companies, that incremental change could have very significant impacts on the ground. We think that all types of solutions are necessary, pilot projects to what the civil society is doing, to what NGOs are doing in the tropical areas and around the world. But we think what we're doing is important as well in recognizing what the studies have shown, that big business got us into where we are with respect to the existential crisis of biodiversity loss, and big business is going to need to lead us out by making changes to how they do their business. So that's how we see the process of trying to create impact. We also obviously try to create impact through forums like this, where we try to educate investors and consumers and have them make different choices when they're spending their dollars. So if all of us can come to the table and make incremental changes, we're certain that ultimately we can solve this problem. And I'm going to turn it back to Lori.